Okay, everyone, it looks like we are going live. Welcome to another ARCS chat. My name is Robin Bauer-Kilgo. I am the Association Manager for ARCS. Couple of quick things to say before we get started. As always, there is a slight delay between when we're doing this chat and when it's getting ported out to YouTube. So just be aware of that when we are actually on the answering questions within YouTube. We also remind you to please sign in to your Gmail or YouTube account. That allows you to play along in the chat while we're doing the live stream. And finally, for some ARCS news, we just announced today the fact that we are accepting proposals for the ARCS 2022 virtual conference. It's being held the first week of December. I think it's December 5th, 7th, and 9th, 2022. Proposals will be accepted until July 15th, 2022. It's going to be a little bit more of a streamlined experience than it was in 2021, although we were very proud of that program, so we hope you all enjoyed it. The theme for this time around is Sustainability 360. So if you're interested in that topic, or even if you just have a good session you think on collections and registration, I encourage you to submit a proposal. If you go to our website, you will see links all over the place on how to submit something for that conference or that virtual conference. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to our host, John Robinette, and we were going to play around with some videos today and have a good time. So we'll see you soon.
Hey, welcome everybody for this last episode of our season, and indeed the last episode that this ARCS Chat crew is going to be doing. With me as always, of course, is Robin, and then Amanda Robinson, who hard registrars down in Florida in the, what, I can never remember what museum it is. It's the Ringling, right? Yes. You keep switching it on me.
I do. So, I just bounce around Tampa Bay to confuse you.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we've been doing this. Well, I've been doing this for 5 years. I've been working with Amanda for 4 years. Started out doing it on Twitter. Do you remember that? I did it 1 year by myself, and then I said, hey, we need some help. And then the board hooked me up with Amanda, who just threw her hat in the ring and just started, running with it. And she has been instrumental in helping to transition into this YouTube format, which we did in order to try and reach a bigger audience. And so, yeah, it's been real. But of course, Robin's been here from the beginning. She worked with Mark Schlemmer to start the Twitter chat. So, and that went really well, and well enough to want to continue it. So, been really thankful for everyone's help in making this happen, just because it takes a lot of effort, and all the emails that don't get returned, the invitations that don't get accepted, and the spreadsheets at the beginning of the year trying to develop topics. It's been really it takes a lot of brain power goes into it. So do you all have any big memories from your time here in this latest generation of the chat that you want to recall?
I mean, I think a lot about my embarrassing moments on a completely international platform.
I can't recall an embarrassing moment for you, to be honest.
That's good.
No, seriously. No, I'm the one that has the embarrassing moments.
I was just going to say, I really appreciated how everyone, especially when the universe known as COVID-19 started, how everyone came together then, and seeing kind of the streams explode, and also seeing, past board, current board, this team, everyone kind of pulled together, especially with John's contacts to the art courier world, having that group come together, talking about their COVID experience. I think it helped. Sounds so cheesy. Bring connection during a time when I think we were all feeling really isolated. So that I think was really important. Nice to have. Yeah. Nice thing to have.
Yes, definitely Robin, a proud moment and a highlight.
Do you remember that time we were on Twitter, and I did a Twitter chat from my car in the parking lot of the train station? That was fun. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, Robin. I don't know if I make it. Anyway, so I got off the train. I was immediately like tweeting questions. So, but I agree. Like once, the spring and fall and summer of 2020 was probably the bigger moment of it all, just because we were, all just trying to react to that crazy situation. So, yeah, so, and also I want to thank the board for, supporting us in our, wild ideas to do whatever we do, or mostly just kind of stay out of the way and let us, pursue topics that we thought were interesting and all that. So with that in mind, we are still looking for people to host the next generation of this. So if you have any wild ideas, different format types or different, let's say, ambitious proposals that you might, see the chat going, we've developed a criteria for it, but it's really just like a way to interact with the membership. And that's kind of it. So, that's really the only thing that we really want out of the chat. So if you have any ideas, even if you don't want to host it, send them our way, info@arcsinfo.org. And, we'd be happy to, we being the board, not me and Amanda, we're not involved in picking successors. So anyway, hopefully by the fall of next year, we can have a different version of this, or versions. Maybe we consider different time zones or multiple chats, multiple languages. What about it? Think about it, send it our way. So speaking of the next plan, we're going to talk about the next generation of collections specialists today. I wrote that ahead of time. So today we're going to hear from professionals in the academic community who are going to provide their insights on the necessary changes that we need to make to our academic programming in order to prepare us for the challenges that lie ahead. So these are all pre-recorded videos, and we gave everyone the same set of questions as prompts, and they're responding to those questions. And they're fairly straightforward things. What are the challenges that you see? What were the academic emphasis? What was the academic emphasis of the past? How are we going to broaden access to the field to create more diverse and broader, what's the word? But how did I word it? Amidst the Great Resignation, how do we attract new people to the field? That's the goal, right? So and then what's the future look like? So that's how we're going to play this out today. So the panelists today include Dr. Elee Wood from the Huntington Library. She's the Nadine and Robert A. Skotheim Director of Education and Public Programs, the Huntington in Los Angeles. And then Dr. Nicole Hodges Persley. She's the Interim Vice Provost of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, and also an associate professor at the Department of American Studies and African American Studies at the University of Kansas. That is the shortest title I have ever read. Dr. Rosanna Flutie, the Interim Director of the Museum Studies Program and Clinical Assistant Professor of Museum Studies at New York University. And last but not least, 16 Crutchfield Trippett, the art director for WiseKey and the developer of the Fine Art International Management MBA at the Geneva Business School. So we're going to start with Dr. Wood's commentary today, and then we're going to, pause it intermittently and take your questions and take questions and comments between the videos as well. So let's get this started, Robin. Cue it up.
Being a faculty member, I was drawing a lot on my prior experience working both as a young person in a museum, but also having worked as a staff member in public programs before I went off to graduate school and did all that. So as I went into this sort of new model, thinking about teaching people museum studies, was really drawing on the experience of how do we help other people experience museums in the way that we really like and care about. And that really kind of focused my thinking around what is my responsibility as an educator to support the practice of museums and the people of museums. So really thinking about the role that everyone has in relation to a collection, in relation to the experience, and how we're bringing all that together. So thinking about whether or not I'm an educator, doesn't mean that I can't focus on collections. I focus on collections in a slightly different way than a collections care person might, or a registrar or a curator. And we're all coming at it in different directions. And so that was one of the things that was really important to me in thinking about this next generation in museum studies, was thinking about more holistically how we all come together around the same idea, or sort of that core idea. So that sort of like shaped a lot of my thinking in the bigger picture, if that gets you where you want to go.
Yeah. And explain your role now at the Huntington.
So I made the leap. I went back into practice to actually preach what I professed, or practice what I professed. So I'm now the Director of Education and Public Programs, which is the major division within the Huntington that emphasizes on public engagement. We cover all areas from volunteers, school programs, gallery experiences, public programs, community engagement, and so forth. So we have a pretty strong role institutionally working with all of the collecting divisions and others to really activate the experience of the Huntington and help people make connections to our collections, and really working on, especially with, because we have a research library, how we are able to surface the stories that exist in the library collections, which are enormous and vast, but also in helping connect people to the botanical collections and the gardens and our art collection. So it's a very transdisciplinary, comprehensive way of thinking about the world, and it's been really interesting to make the shift from being a faculty member back into practice. I actually quite enjoy trying to make it all come together in the way that I had hoped my students would.
It's so interesting. God, I wish this was the live thing. I want to ask you so many questions, but we'll stick to the script.
Yeah.
So in previous, historically, maybe historically is even too big of a term. What is the quote unquote traditional way that you've seen of teaching museum studies, and maybe a certain emphasis on X, Y, or Z, or explain kind of where we typically come from.
So what I would say is that I think most typically where early professional training programs were really focused very disciplinarily in terms of, you're going to learn how to do curatorial practice, but maybe you don't even talk about what curatorial practice is. You're just becoming expert and depth in your field. You might be studying collections care and management, for example, that was really the focus of your work, or you might just be doing education. And one of the things that I think, so it was sort of like very specific to the role within the museum. So you wouldn't cross the streams, or you're only a collections person, you're only education, you're only curatorial. And I think that one of the things that I really liked about the program that we developed at IUPUI was that it was very much that, yes, you can be a collections person, but you have to understand why education matters. And if you're an educator, you have to understand why collections matters, and why you can't just let everybody sort of play with all the stuff all the time. To really kind of bring a different perspective that this is a whole institution that has many parts, and that you have to understand how it all works together. That I think becomes a more valuable way of working together around, we're all in this towards a mission of an institution, and that mission may have many different pathways, but we're all part of that same idea. So that I think is really kind of something that was important to me. And there's still programs out there that are very much focused on just being a curator, or just doing collections, or any of those kinds of things. And I think that the nuance that it brings actually helps for a lot more collaborative work internally, as much as it does kinds of planning and how we're able to tackle challenges that come up in different ways of thinking.
Robin, can we pause it for a second? This is super interesting. So of us here, Amanda's, I think, the only one that actually has a museum studies degree. How would you say her response? Is that true, Robin? Did I misspeak?
So I have a graduate certificate. So I have from GW, as I think most of us do with distance learning. But yeah, I have a graduate certificate on top of
all right. My bad. I'm sorry. But how does her description of the quote unquote traditional methodology speak to your experience studying in a museum studies program?
Well, and I guess I should also qualify that my graduate certificate is in museum studies, but the program I went through was art historical based. I really appreciated hearing her like more generalist perspective, because from what she's saying, it sounds like the programs they have developed really give you an understanding of what it's like to work in a museum. Like everything you are doing should be related to your mission. You have to interact with different departments, and you have to have some type of understanding of what your facilities staff's doing and why they do what they do, what your educational staff's doing and why they do what they do. Because so much of the work we do in museums are collaborative. My program, I was able to develop a lot of the coursework myself, so I could pick and choose. And I did a lot of things that were object-based because I knew I wanted to do collections management work. And I would argue that my program was good and it gave me some idea of what you were doing, but it probably wasn't as comprehensive as a full-on museum studies program would have been. And it was nowhere near as valuable as the real life work experience I got in internships or jobs. With that being said, I took a lot of like governance classes, and I understood really well through my program how an institution should work. And I found that actually served me the best in terms of my experience in education at a graduate level.
Robin, did you see something similar or?
Yeah, I mean, I ended up here in kind of a roundabout way. I think that a lot of people from my generation ended up where my master's degree is historic administration, public history, because I was going to save buildings theoretically, but ended up getting a job with a museum. So then when I was working on the job is when I kind of thought I should go out and get a graduate certificate specializing in collections management. So that's why I did the GW program way back when they used to deliver it via CDs, which shows my age. So yeah, I think for me, kind of like what Amanda said, I took a couple museum studies classes when I did my grad work, and they were more about that governance level and that kind of thing. So when I did it when I was working and doing a graduate certificate, it was so based on just ethical collection. It's the GW program, right? So it's all preventative conservation, legal and ethical stuff, all that. So it's hard for me to compare what people are learning nowadays in these more official museum studies degrees. I think that people are coming out with much stronger base than I ever did. It was all stuff like while I was working, I was like, oh, this makes more sense now. Like it's like practical applications. So it's just a slightly different world, I think. Now.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone listening has any other insight or is currently in a program, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to see. And we'll continue on with the video, but I do want to note that due to time constraints, we do have 4 of these, and they're all significant in length. So we will be posting the entire videos if you want to see their full commentary on the ARC's YouTube channel. So because we unfortunately won't get to all of their responses to these questions. So with that, let's continue with Dr. Wood and get another response. She's going to talk about the future or new issues.
So good. I mean, so what I want to do next is I want to get your perspective on some of the key changes that are taking place, and then follow that up with what if you think that these changes are being reflected in newer curriculum that are being developed.
There's no question that some of the major areas of change that are happening are really understanding the nuances of audiences and the importance of institutions being able to understand themselves as entities in a cultural environment. So I'm talking a lot about understanding diversity, access, inclusion, accessibility, all of those kinds of things, but not just from the audience standpoint, but also from the kinds of collections, the collecting that we do, the practices that we follow, the meaning that objects have that can be different across different types of audiences. And I think that shift is really critical in helping us be able to become more relevant for communities. And that is part of our survival. So I think it's all kind of interconnected around, Stephen Weil says, being about somebody rather than something, that we're really trying to really understand how and why the kinds of collections we have matter to different groups of people. So I think, decolonization and decolonizing the collection is a really good example of paying attention to what is there. Why do we have it? What is it here for? How can we better use it? How do we care for it? Does it belong to us? Should it belong to someone else? Like, I think those kinds of questions are pretty key, and they cut across all the institution. Thinking about how we're representing objects, or how we're telling stories about the collections, how we're pulling out different stories that have not been told before. I think all of those kinds of things are really, that is sort of at the core of everything, but it can even go down to how we take care of objects, and thinking about culturally relevant practices around managing collections, for example. Taking care of Indigenous collections has a lot of variation that sometimes kind of fly in the face of what you learned in school. That you're not supposed to let something have light, but there are certain types of native objects that need care and feeding in a very, very different way that might make you feel a little bit like, but that's not best practice. But I think the question is, going back to that, what does best practice mean is really about what's good work around doing the best by all the people involved, or all of the needs that are there. It's not just a one step, this is the only way to do it. So that sort of expanding ways of knowing about how we deal with material objects, concepts, people, all of those kinds of things, I think are really at that core of where we need to be shifting towards, and has been for the last probably 5 years for sure.
So decolonization, diversity, equity, inclusion, these are the big issues now, right? And is there anything that you would have added to the list? I mean, I think that those are kind of the critical ones, right?
Yeah, for like in general for the field as a whole, I would say very much so. Like there is a huge cultural shift happening in the United States in general, but specifically within the museum field, especially after everything we've been through in the last 2 years as a nation. It's lovely to see that being reflected in the work we do, because it touches everything, right?
Yeah.
And those are some important questions that we've brought up on this program before, and in those conversations we've tried to answer for ourselves. I'm such a literal and practical person that I'm over here wishing programs were like teaching you more of the not so much the logistics, because you can, the museum registration methods is going to walk you through how you need to book a shipment and all that kind of jazz as a registrar. But, how do you advocate to build a larger staff? Like, how do you argue for the resources you need to get the collections care work done? Yeah. And we talk about it a lot because it seems to be a natural path in the curatorial track to go from, curator to leader to management. And some of those leadership programs have been developed to do just that, but we don't really offer that for other avenues of the field.
Yeah. Well, 16's comments that we're going to get to at the end kind of veer a little bit into that territory. So we can maybe comment a little bit more on that. But I'm going to go back to the diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility ideas, because Dr. Hodges Persley, who's got the next video, we can go ahead and cue that up, Robin. And she this is her profession, right? This is what she does, and she teaches. And so she's going to speak to it. We're going to skip ahead a little bit because we're going to run out of time, but she's got some interesting things to say about it, because she is an expert in the field. And I think she's also got a really interesting perspective from the point of view that she is not a museum professional specifically, but she was in charge of the museum studies program for a bit before she, got further promoted. So I think it's interesting to have someone who is in charge of a program that has to see it from a different perspective. And
we're having a slight network issue. So let me see if I can reload the video and get it going.
But you see what I'm saying, Amanda? It's like, we have to, someone who is viewing museum studies almost from the outside, and from their point of view, they're going to, see what they deem the most critical elements of the field. So
remind me to share something with you, because I have a funny tidbit about someone from the outside teaching.
Okay. Let's get into that.
All right. Let me know if you guys would like me to skip ahead. Feel free to let me know, and I'm happy.
All right.
To do that. Okay.
Sounds good.
To the work as an insider outsider, if you will. I write about conceptual art as it relates to performance, and I have a book called Sampling and Remixing Blackness and Hip Hop Theater and Performance, which covers conceptual artists such as Elee and others who explore race, ethnicity, gender, and intersectional identity in their work. So these are as far as critical new subjects, I think that pertains to the art world. I think identity has always been central to our work as artists. And so this isn't new. I think the perspective of whose identities are we talking about and what types of intersections of those identities are we concentrating on, and also asking ourselves, who is the we that we're talking about, whether that means the collections or the artists that we seek to place in our museums, the stories and cultures that we are concerned with when we're cataloging and we're acquiring pieces, what communities we choose to think as having value, and then bringing those pieces into our spaces. Also asking the different cultural complexities that surround museums, and museum objects, the space that they take up within the actual neighborhoods where they sit, and the programming that surrounds the art objects and the art that we showcase. How do we showcase it? Do we consider the culture that not only the art is produced by and through, but the ways in which those art objects tell us stories that are not captured in the object itself? And so I'm hoping that we'll see not only critical new subjects of thinking about the complexity of our identities, but the ways in which we interact in society, and what's missing from our collective human narrative. I'm also thinking about the ways that particular social constructs of identity will impose on digital space. We are now talking about metaverse and NFTs and, digital art that is not necessarily physically tangible in the same way. And so
That's a big
I'm
subject
really
that we
interested
haven't
in the ways that
included.
These social constructs of identity, how will they translate into those spaces, or will they be completely set aside for us to reimagine ourselves anew outside of these social constructs that have connections to systemic inequity and historic oppression. So that's something that I'm seeing pop up with museum studies students. I just recently did a master's thesis with a student on metaverse culture and the relationship to the existing museum space. So that's exciting. Another question that I was asked was thinking about creating curriculum, and how do we create curriculum to address this moment, and how does that relate to programs? I think thinking about who has the seat at the table and curating the table in our spaces to make sure that we have representation, not only embodied representation, but cultural and ideological representation within our spaces. We should think about not having everyone of the same racial identity, ethnic identity, cultural, religious, varying mobilities. I think we have to think as broad and diverse as the world we live in. And we also have to think about class, because I think within the museum space, it's very challenging to cultivate and create cultural space that is really mediated by and through this idea of what is good art. And I think the high-low art debates that have ebbed and flowed over the past 20 years, I think still plague us in the art museum. And I think we could look to theater to think about site-specific work and the ways that we might invite communities in not as necessarily just a form of restitution or reconciliation, but to ask non-experts about how they would like to experience art, and how they would like it to interact in their lives. What type of accessibility would they need to be able to engage? Would that involve childcare? Would that involve food and support? Would that involve different hours of accessibility? And I think we miss opportunities to create really strategic conversations that might allow us to cultivate new opportunities and experiences to make art more accessible. I see a question here about the Great Resignation and how do
we might have to come back to the Great Resignation one, because I think that's a big one. In terms of attracting new audiences, that's where that question was. But let's go back and talk about the resignation representation. I think that this is going to be the defining challenge that this next generation faces. I mean, if I can speak on such a grandiose level, right? But it's museums have started to do it in the gallery space, right? But it seems to, the barriers, there's a glass ceiling, it seems like, and that sort of diversification of upper administration is really sort of the next phase. And that's the hard one, the harder one. It's a lot easier to change the galleries because you do it every 3 months anyway. But I mean, any thoughts on that? I mean, look, I mean, it's going to be critical, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know how we do it, but I mean, look, well, I say, I don't know how we do it. We have ideas, right? In terms of, mentorships and internships and things of this nature, but it's really about, being able to attract that next audience, right? So
yeah, and making it accessible and making it a space where they feel welcome, I think is a big part of it, and a big part of what she was talking about. And I'm really inspired. I want to take a class with her.
Yeah, I know, right?
So many interesting things to say, and I just want to absorb it like a sponge. But yeah, we're kind of, I mean, everyone's doing this. We're all fighting with the cycle that's been in place for a very, very long time. And it's going to be really hard to change culture and access and equality. It's a lifetime commitment. It's going to be generational commitment for sure. But it might sound small, making changes in the gallery with what we collect and what we display and giving those artists and those artworks space, but we got to start somewhere. It's a good place to be. And in terms of accessibility with, I think back about to my graduate program, I was the only one who was able to complete their graduate certificate because I was in a financial position that could do it. I had family support who would let me take classes over the summer. Every person who started in my graduate program with me to get their certificate dropped out. And there were like 5 of us, 7 of us. It wasn't like a huge number out of the whole cohort of 15 or so. I was the only one. In the class before me, there was only one other person, and I had to take out loans to do it, so we make it really inaccessible. Like, it's great these programs are there and that's lovely, but not if no one can do it.
In some, I can't remember if it was in this one or if it was another speaker, but they talk also about just being able to, form a connection with the institution, and that connection usually comes from seeing part of yourself reflected in the institution. And so that speaks to the importance of making sure the gallery represents, as Dr. Hodges Persley says, represents the neighborhood. It represents the people in the region and the people of the world, right? And if you don't see yourself there, then what connection can you have, and why would you ever want to work there, right? So that's or you might want to work there to change that, but it's a bigger leap. Robin, can you play a little bit more of her, just because I think she might be getting to that part, please? Thanks.
I see a question here about the Great Resignation and how do we attract new people to the field and reach more diverse audiences. I think we have to ask different questions. Ultimately, what does more diverse audience mean? I think if you are starting from a dominant perspective that you assume a normative audience to be always already white, then we have a problem. I think, if you get out of our comfort zones, you get out of your comfort zone, I get out of my comfort zone, we go into spaces to experience the world differently. And that can be as simple as shopping at a different grocery store, going to a store you would never go to, or inviting a community in that you know nothing about. I think we can't be afraid to be vulnerable. And I think when you see artists of color resigning, curators resigning, and other roles within the museum, it's because people want to be able to be at work and be accepted holistically as they are. They don't want to have to explain themselves. They don't want to have to apologize for themselves, nor do the artists. They want people to have thoughtfully considered who they are before they invite them into the space. And I think that's the challenge for all of us, is that we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable before our colleagues in ways that might make us feel insecure. But through that insecurity, we can identify new skill sets, and we can open up new opportunities to rethink and refresh how we want to cultivate art making and art experiencing in the world. Let's see.
We're gonna have to unfortunately cut it. You definitely need to watch the rest of this, though. This is it's too important to not finish. I think this one everyone will benefit from. Well, you'll all benefit from seeing it all, but this one especially. I think that's a super important point in terms of you have to have a baseline of expectation before you can change something. And right now that baseline expectation of what you're going to find is that it's from a white perspective, simply because we've all identified that as having to change, right? So that vulnerability of making that change, I think, is what she's saying. She's saying it from an art perspective, but I think it applies across the board, right? I mean, yeah. What are your thoughts, Amanda?
I agree. And as we transition to the next video, one of the things that she had mentioned, and this is from a very specific collections management perspective, reminded me of a chat that we had with Francis from the Minneapolis Institute, I believe, all about the diversification of data. And, it seems like a very simple thing, we collected one set of data for the objects we have, but now we need to broaden and collect more information and more data. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, what is our goal? Why are we trying to do that? What's the value of that? Some of this information is incredibly sensitive. We're not always going to be able to protect and control it. And, where is the agency of the artists or the people we're collecting this information on? And I think those are types of things that we may not be able to get into at the nitty-gritty when you're in a graduate program, but maybe you also can. But those are not necessarily conversations we've had before.
Right. I mean, can you imagine? What does that shift look like in a graduate program? It's. Yeah.
I think a big part of it is a lot of what she had said. It's if we're going to start exploring those avenues, we need to have everybody at the table to have that conversation. A room full of people that look just like you and have the same background and experiences as you. It's going to have a very limited focus. But if you broaden the doors a bit, you'll get a lot more input and perspective.
Right. And somehow, and avoiding the tokenization of it. It's oh yeah, we checked that quota. It's it's got to be more embedded in the methodology. Mm-hmm. So, and interesting enough, there was a lot of criticism for AAM when that conference was going on. I saw a lot of people interpreting their programming as biased and everything during that conference. So look, it's the only point is that everyone's going through this, right? And everyone's fighting to make the necessary changes. And it's got to start at its core, and that vulnerability, you have to open up yourself in order to
it's going to be messy too. And I think I'm terrified of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, hurting someone's feelings. But we've got to be able to get over that and forgive each other, because we're human and we're going to mess up every turn.
Yeah, 100%. Let's get another perspective here with Dr. Flutie from, Dr. Flutie from NYU.
Would you like to start this one at the beginning, John, or do you want to progress?
Let's skip ahead a little. Really appreciate her rallying. She just got over COVID, so really
so
glad she
the
could join us.
question that I think was posed to me that I want to speak at length to was, amid the Great Resignation, how do we attract new people to the field and reach more diverse audiences? Unquestionably, museums have been struggling with this for a very long time. The pandemic forced an urgency around this question, and the shift that I've seen, and especially in how many people are leaving the field right now, and what that means for when I think of our class of 2022 that's just graduated last month, and in the months ahead are seeking their meaningful museum future. They want to get careers with full-time benefits. They want to be having meaningful work. And there has been so much shift in the change. So the Great Resignation, it's real. So many of us have started looking inward and thinking about what skills and what ways our knowledge could be transferred to other areas, what sort of understandings about the field of museums that we possess that could be utilized elsewhere. And also just maybe more largely, why is change so hard and slow to come in museums? So I think many museum professionals have been lifting their heads and just thinking about what could be next. Is it healthy to stay in the field, or is it really important to keep going? And the place that I think, if I were to just impart a little bit of where I see so much oxygen, I think, coming to help people sort of reside in the knowledge that what they're doing and the work that they're conducting in museums is just so critical, is really about mentoring the next generation and mentoring younger people in the field. That if one is thinking about leaving museums, and I don't think it's healthy to stay forever, all of us should try other types of career paths. Museum work, just for me, has been by far the most fulfilling work that I have ever done in my working world. And now that I get to teach about museums, alongside also still working and consulting with museums, it is such an incredible profession. And yet, when I think about mentorship and the lack of opportunities when we claim to see more diverse people working in museums, by extension, then we will attract more diverse types of audience. And I want to caution in how we're using this word diversity, that we need to leave the field better than we found it. And I think it's time for museums to get their house in order and to really be looking inward and really be thinking about what mentorship opportunities lie within each of our organizations. And so this affects every area of the museum, including the areas that we're talking about today. But I really think that every one of us, even if we think that we might be leaving the field, we have to think about how we're going to be leaving it that much better. This might mean looking at teen programs that might be happening at your museum, looking at people who are coming through family programs, imagining what sort of impressions that they're getting about museum work. It means certainly looking at the internship opportunities. And I think that that is far and large, this idea of what's changed in the pandemic. I'm seeing far less internship opportunities writ large, far more paid internships. And I think that is such a wonderful shift that has come in the pandemic, that the reckoning of how labor and unpaid labor had been such a formative backbone of the way museum work gets done. And now we're seeing far more paid internships that I cannot wait to see the day where there are just no more unpaid internships. And I do think that that will lift so many more types of inroads and opportunities for more diverse people to come and work. So if I were to think about what the Great Resignation means, that is just such an important shift, to see more mentorship opportunities and more internships. I thank you so much for letting me join, and I am thinking of all of us as we're sort of both stretching our minds to think about the work that lays ahead, but also the important work that we're doing now. Thank you.
This is really a great point. So the original question was, with so many people leaving the field, and I'm sure everyone knows people who have, for one reason or another, left the field, or they during the pandemic, I speak to say shipping companies or other museums. They're looking for art handlers. They're looking for people all the time, right? They're understaffed in many cases. And so this is the Great Resignation that we're talking about, right? And this is how it's manifesting in our world. And so, we not only need to diversify the staff that we already have, but we need to, bring in new people, and hopefully that, more diverse backgrounds to the field. So I think this is what, we've seen for the last two video clips, and it is absolutely critical. And I think driving the point home of mentorships, and which ARCS has a mentorship program, I will remind you, and they are actively seeking volunteers for it at the moment. But also, the paid internships. And so this has always been a big debate. And so let's you have any additional thoughts, Amanda? Like, is this on your radar? Robin, are you seeing this as well?
I'm seeing definitely the internships, as you mentioned, just because, as you guys know, like I help post to the ARCS website. So I see a lot more paid internships coming through. Like, people kind of know that if they put internships up, there has to be a stipend or something connected to it nowadays, which has been really heartening, because God knows when I started in the late 90s, early O's, it was like it's free labor, you know what I mean? And you kind of knew you had to do it that way. So that's been wonderful to see that change in the field, for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I can tell you, like, at our organization, I think it was around for the longest time, our museum actually hadn't paid internship programs for graduate level students, but they did get paid, and we had a lot of fellowships, and that was just like, a diamond in the rough. But with AAMD's, I can't remember, like, it was an announcement or their statement on internships a few years ago, they basically stated that if you're a participating organization, you need to be paying, because free labor is not acceptable anymore. And that kind of gave our museum a good push to commit to, we're either going to be paying them, or they're going to be, because we're part of a university, they have to be earning credit. But ideally, they're getting both of those things at the same time,
right?
Which is exciting, but again, new. But there are a lot of opportunities. I just had our prep staff come back from PACN at Crystal Bridges in May, and is it Jelaine from LACMA who we had on the program maybe a year ago?
Julia Latney.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah. And Jeremy, I think, also at the time.
Yeah, Jerry Smith.
Jerry, okay. And
the Broad program.
She started a program at the Broad, and it was just like our entire prep staff came back motivated to try and get that same structure set up here. So, and it's just nice, especially in the particular field of art preparators and art handlers, which I, again, will always say I feel is the most underappreciated part of our profession. It's nice to see them doing that for themselves, and to really elevating those opportunities for people who otherwise, wouldn't have those experiences.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think that, I think that what we're talking about is real, tangible things that we can do right now. And, posting salaries is one that also comes up as well. ARCS is doing this now. But also we should keep in mind that, I don't know if, people younger than, say, me, are in conversation enough with people that are a generation ahead of me who might be resistant to paid internships there. And I do call for you to have a conversation with somebody about that, just because I know several people are very reactionary, very harsh on people that believe in unpaid internships, like, but it was a reality for a long time. And I think that it's important to have that discussion with people in order to create a true understanding that this is a progression, and it's not always easy for someone that grew up in experiencing things one way to make a dramatic overnight shift to this new radical way of thinking. And because of course it affects budgets and as well as everything else, and you can't just get your board approval to start paying everyone overnight. So I understand that, but I'm just saying have that dialogue. So so let's move on to the last video with the 16 Crutchfield. I think she's interesting because it's up until now we've had a very sort of American focused perspective, and she's in Switzerland, and when we posed the question of more diverse audiences and attracting people to the field, her response comes from a very different spot, right? And we're gonna try and find where she that position in the video, so bear with us for a second. But I think it's an interesting proposition and another way to think about it, and besides just diverse, say ethnic or racial backgrounds. So let's go ahead and play it.
Studying in art school right now, I can only encourage them to learn their craft as best as possible, because they'll be the ones that we'll be listening to eventually in all this turmoil, to set it back straight. So artists have a huge role to play. But I also think that with the new technologies that are being developed, that have been in development for the last 20 years, things such as cryptocurrencies, such as artificial intelligence, such as the metaverse, which is coming on, the Web3, which is coming on, art has a huge role to play. And we saw that with the pandemic, in that creativity didn't stop. It's not because we're confined at home, it's not because nothing is open outside, that the brain doesn't keep on creating. I mean, that's where we're humans. And artists have been very, very keen. Like obviously there's been a lot of Zooming, and there's been a lot of call conferencing, but there's also been a lot of people videoing their art, putting it on Instagram, showing it out there, sharing it to the world. We've seen the Paris Royal Ballet do the play. They were dancing on the balcony, from one balcony to the other, exchanging. We've seen musicians play their role and their part in a band from different areas of the world. And I think that's opened a whole lot of new tools to express this creativity, which is not going to go away. Once we've had the taste of it, I think it's very difficult now to go back. Of course, it's going to be side
She's talking
by
about how
side.
we're going to have
I
to
strongly
respond
believe
to
that
this
concerts
new
will still
creativity.
happen, and pandemic or not pandemic. But on the other hand, there are bands reforming. We've all heard of ABBA.
Let's
other ones,
scoot ahead a little bit.
There's now a screaming out for help and an ID problem, identification issues, etc. All that is a part of it, and I think we need to be open. We need to be solidary, and we need to use these new tools to fix things. And again, in order to do that, you need to understand them. How does the curriculum address this? How do we adjust our programs? Well, again, I think starting from history, I'm a strong believer that history repeats itself, and we can learn from our mistakes, but also just learn from history. So I think all the new technology, it's there, but it's nothing new. And we went from painting and sitting in an artist studio at the end of the 19th century, to photography in the early 20th century, to video, to having our own PCs and everyone being democratizing the system, to now very advanced technology, which a lot of people already master quite well. So teaching that in schools, I think, can only be a plus. Also, I think one of the things that the pandemic has taught us is to be knowledgeable enough so that you can bounce back when there's a setback. For example, how many times will we organize?
Yeah, let's go ahead and push it further a little bit.
Year? Even aspect is important for students to do that. amidst great resignation, how do we attract new people in the field and reach more diverse audiences? Well, that I think the online has been, easily done. I mean, we don't talk about geographical regions anymore. We're a global world, and that's fine. Like, in the MBA that that I've devised, I'm not teaching it, I'm supervising it, and I'm organizing the field trips. To attract more audiences, you can actually spread your wings and cover all sorts of different. I'm sure somebody who wanted to be a chemist to learn, to be a pharmacist, never thought about working in the art world. Well, today it's possible because it's necessary and it's needed. And the art world, this new technology, AI, immersive exhibitions, people movement in a museum, interactive, all that sort of thing. They're all new areas of potential study and potential improvement in the art world today. So I think shouldn't be a problem to attract and to have diversification in your student body. One of the last questions that I was given was, note the changes that I'm currently seeing taking place and the role of the pandemic. Well, I think the role of the pandemic, the result of it was that everything got accelerated to an incredibly fast rhythm, and that we need to let go of our old habits and our old ways of teaching. I think we need to be much more aware of what's going on around us. The NFT world is a completely new area, including for me, with a new audience, with new communities, interacting all the time, worldwide for that matter. So we need to embrace that as the faculty of any school, and need to be a FAE. I always think you teach people what you know. So I think that's one of the good reasons.
So her response to diversification was coming at it from a wildly different point of view, which was bringing in people from just completely different fields, which I think is a really interesting point of view. I mean, now, of course, she's referring to art. Maybe it doesn't translate as well to, say, a history collection or an archive or what have you. Maybe it's a tribal collection, but I think it's a pretty interesting perspective to think about that. And if you do get a chance to watch the whole video, she ends on a very optimistic note, which I think is really appreciated at this time. So, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Amanda?
Yeah, I was going to say people should listen to her whole video. And at the beginning, when she talks a little bit about her background and what she's doing now with the MBA program she's developed, she talks about her students and the experiences. Like, she has people from all over the entire European continent that she's teaching. So, geographical borders really don't exist in, the program that they're offering. And that was really interesting. And I thought, gosh, maybe that's a European thing.
But it's also an MBA program. It's
yes,
not an art program. It's a business program.
Yeah. So, yeah. And that's like, woohoo, ding, ding, because not enough leadership gets taught in the field of collections management. Right. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And maybe it's easier in Europe because multiple countries border each other. In the United States, we're a bit isolated over here with just Canada and Mexico. Not just Canada and Mexico, but all we have is each other. So
we know what you mean.
Yeah. We only have 2 other countries. Europe has like multiple countries they can count on multiple hands.
I mean, Robin, what's your thought? I mean, your background is really different and not necessarily art oriented. I mean, do you think that? I mean, look, yeah, of course, someone with a computer science degree can come in and work for a database company, but does it go beyond that for you?
A little bit. I mean, my background is weird, where my undergrad is anthropology. I was going to be an archaeologist. And then I got a computer science minor to make my IBM computer salesman father happy with doing anthropology as a bachelor's degree. And then I switched over to museum. So I think that there's skills that people can use. I know definitely there's some folks I know who have dealt with database conversions who are now working for hospitals and other groups helping with database conversions, which I have found very interesting. I think having a certain skill set is always important when you're in our field. I also really truly believe that while no job is perfect and you will always find unhappiness, generally speaking, you need to be pretty satisfied with what you're doing, because this is what we spend most of our days doing and thinking about and debating about. So I think that if you find yourself not happy or miserable, you really got to reassess. And it's easy for me to say that too, where it's like, I'm lucky my partner provides my healthcare and is very nice and lets me do silly, things, like not silly, but things that are a little off kilter and not as traditional sometimes with work. But I do believe that you need to have at least a little bit of self-satisfaction with all these jobs. And if you can find some skill sets within your background that help you do a different job that is still applicable, I think that's an important thing. You know what I mean? Because again, we spend way too much time doing our jobs, so.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of people are realizing too, that their skill set can translate to a different career. As registrars and collections managers, you're essentially a project manager. So, and that is an essential component of any career. So, we hope that, given the changes that we see afoot, that we can also attract other people that have, interesting skill sets that can contribute to the things that we do. So that is, I think we're going to have to leave it today. We just hit the hour mark. But I do want to thank the panelists for taking the time to record their videos and send us their thoughts. Like I said, we're going to have them up on the ARC's YouTube channel. And I think they are all worth a listen, because they are, there's a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge and a lot of discovery and education that went into those comments, even if they're condensed to a shorter period of time. So we can all learn from that. And that's gonna be this crew signing off for ARC's chat. Amanda, Robin's been wonderful doing this together, and I have still only met Amanda once in real life. At the ARC's conference 2019. I've met Robin 2 or 3 times. So maybe we can meet again in person. Or maybe we're just going to keep our regular ARC's chat time and keep doing Zoom.
We'll just do this every Tuesday or every Tuesday, the first of the month.
Thank God you have a job that allows you to take the time to do this. So, I'll
just say on behalf of ARCS too, since I'm like the official representative, thanks to you both for the time and effort you've taken in lining up people, the research, all that kind of stuff. Just huge thank you. And this will live for as long as YouTube lives, which God knows, but as long as Google and YouTube is around, these will live on. And again, like John said, if someone else is interested in taking this program on a different format and a different thought, please email us at info@arcsinfo.org. We are always open to new ideas. And we have some newer board members who are really excited about this program. So if you think you want to take this on, let us know. But again, huge thanks to John and Amanda for spearheading this.
It was fun. And I'm going to recognize Mark Schlemmer for even starting the format in the first place, to be able to have this dialogue. Yeah, exactly. Even to be able to have the dialogue, directly with your professional organization is, I think, an important concept. So let's hope it can continue here in the future. And maybe we'll do an offshoot that's an unrated version or something. All right. Anyway, with that, we're gonna close up shop. Remember, the podcast is going to come out this coming Friday. Look for it on Spotify, Stitcher, Google, and Apple Podcasts. And join the mentorship program, because as we've just heard, it's very important to your career and for the field at large. And any other final thoughts, you two?
Just a big thank you to everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for your time and listening. More than anything, I guess, the tuning in and downloading the podcast, replaying and the YouTube videos. It's super important to the whole thing perpetuating itself. So and congrats to the new board members who just started. I'm going to keep going here.
So, someone's going to have to cut
president.
you off.
So, do you guys hear the one about the chicken? Anyway.
All right. Okay, everyone.
Thanks again.
Stay safe. Thanks again to John and Amanda, and we will see you soon.
Bye.